Yeah, so we're here with Alex Cox. Sorry that we were late. There's something going on over at Circle K. It was hard to get back to the street. Yeah, there's always something going on at Circle K, of course. So thanks for sticking around. Thanks for coming, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Straight to hell. Return. So you talked a little bit in your introduction about kind of why you wanted to revisit. I know that you mentioned that there's enhanced cruelty and violence in the film, and that's kind of the one way you're selling it. So why did you feel like maybe it needed more violence? And why did you put more in originally?
Because the technology changed. Because when it is a spaghetti western, and spaghetti westerns didn't have the technology of violence which is current today. Because every movie now, if they fire a gun, the flame comes out of the end of the gun in an enormous blast of smoke and light and stuff, and it's all done digitally. And I was just thinking, what a pity that when we made the film, we didn't have access to the digital technology that we do now. And I thought, but wait, we do have access to this technology now, and so then it became a possibility.
So this is really the version you always really wanted to have 24 years ago. Now it's exactly as you wanted.
Well, I think it's kind of evolved, and I didn't really know. I mean, I think this is the version that I'd like to have now. You know, whereas the version that we had in 1986 was the version then. But I think this is the version that I definitely am. I like this version a lot. I think this is my favorite.
So when you look at reviews, like original reviews of Straight to Hell, it seemed like there were some very extreme reactions to the film from critics. Either it was too much of something or not enough of something. And do you have any theories about why the reaction was so extreme to this?
I don't really know. I mean, I just think that at that time, Italian westerns weren't very hip. You know, I mean, people weren't really aware. I mean, obviously people who were very enthusiastic about Italian westerns were aware of them. Joe Strummer was aware of them because he was a devotee of Italian westerns, and I was too. But I think that the mainstream critics, they expect a sort of a certain degree of propriety. You know, as you move through your career, you're supposed to become more and more serious and spend more and more money and live in Los Angeles, and the film didn't, so the trajectory of the film wasn't the trajectory that perhaps I should have taken.
And I also read that you were you offered to direct Three Amigos, and you chose this instead. This was the western you wanted to make. Yeah. That's true.
Because you know, one thing I really hated about the 80s was that at a certain point in the 80s, you couldn't make a film unless it had somebody from Saturday Night Live. And I just didn't think any of those guys were good actors. I mean, Steve Martin was okay, but the rest of them, Chevy Chase and Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, they weren't good actors. You know, and the idea that these guys had a monopoly on, you know, on film, that you could only make a film if you had Dan Aykroyd in it, you know, it was kind of sick. But it wasn't only here. There was a similar phenomenon in England at the time. There was a comic troupe called The Comic Strip who were on television in England. Alexi Sale and various other people. And the same applied. You couldn't make an independent film in England unless you had some of these comics. And it was kind of boring and very, very kind of production line driven, you know. So yes, it was sad to say I did not get to come to Tucson to direct Alfonso Arau in Three Amigos, but that's all right.
So speaking of casting for films, I mean, obviously Straight to Hell has, I think calling the cast eclectic would be sort of an understatement. Do you have any particular memories of who maybe stood out as a colorful character on set, more so than any others? I mean, was everyone pretty much easy to work with?
It went really fast, because the thing was, the film was supposed to be shot in 3 weeks, and it ended up taking 4. It was like 22 days or something like that. And so it went really quickly. And oddly enough, because the film itself is so excessive, but there wasn't really an awful lot of time for eccentricity or excess, because you just had to go so fast. And what impressed me was that there were some people in that crew, you know, which was largely musicians, who were really good actors. And I think Elvis Costello is a very strong actor. And I'm surprised he hasn't had more of a career as an actor, but I think he didn't want one, you know. And Strummer really draws your eye. I mean, Strummer is very, he's got a real presence, a real charisma, and so that was nice.
The genesis of this project was not, maybe, from what I've read, was not necessarily that you were planning on making a movie. It was part of a rock and roll tour of Nicaragua that you originally wanted to do.
Yeah.
So how did that sort of mutate into what we now see on screen with Straight to Hell?
We were trying to do this rock and roll tour of Nicaragua that was supposed to take place in August of 1986, I think. And we were going to fund it. It was going to be Elvis Costello, Joe Strummer, and the Pogues. We're going to go all around Nicaragua and play concerts. And we thought we would fund it by making a video, you know, a long video to sell it on VHS. But we, of course, were foolish because we didn't realize, I and my collaborators, that large media corporations are not interested in supporting revolutionary movements in Latin America. And so, when we failed to raise the money for the video, Eric Fellner, who was the producer, said he thought that he might be able to raise the money for a film if we put all those musicians in it, and if we made it in the same time frame. And he went to Ireland. It was really Island Records, but they had like a film division, and that was the genesis. That was how it came about. So it was really the genius of the producer thinking on his feet that made the film happen.
So lots of your films obviously have a very strong connection to music. Of course, Repo Man and Syd and Nancy, and this film. So which came first? Did you have a love of music that sort of, or before film, or did film come first, or how did the connection happen? Using so many musicians in your film.
I kind of liked them both. I mean, I was very, because I lived near a big city. When I was a kid, I lived near a big city in England called Liverpool. Liverpool had multiple cinemas, which would often play very obscure films. You know, there were double bills, and quite often you'd have like a kind of a French policier, like The Samurai, doubled with a spaghetti western, you know. And I don't know how they said them to stay open, but they did. I mean, they were actually making money off of these kind of bizarre, dubbed European movies. And but at the same time, it was also a big concert city, the home of the Beatles. And so I saw like, you know, Frank Zappa and all these bands, and Bowie, and so it was, they kind of seemed like music and films at that time, because I was growing up consuming those media.
And I think the music connections of your films also, I think, help give them sort of a cult appeal. And we were talking at dinner about what cult means. And I think you're often referred to as a cult director. What do you think that really means? Do you feel like you're a cult director? Are your movies cult movies, or is that even really a genre that can be hung on you?
Well, I mean, it's not a genre.
You're right.
I mean, cult isn't a genre. I mean, cult is a word used to describe the audience's response, for example, to Rocky Horror Picture Show. You know, is the most obvious example. The Loft's relationship with Rocky Horror Picture Show, and the audience enthusiasm that has generated. That is the cult film par excellence. But I think that where people perhaps go wrong is if they set out to make a cult film, because a cult is the result. It's not there at the beginning. You have to do the thing and then see what happens, you know. And maybe it'll be successful, maybe it'll fail, maybe it will have a following over the years, or maybe it won't. But I don't think it's a very useful description because, you know, a lot of the time they talk about, you know, like Borges, the Argentinian writer, they talk about him as a cult writer. You think a cult writer, the guy is one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, you know, and so it sort of, in a way, it almost diminishes the work to use that term. So, I mean, it's nice if people are enthusiastic about things and if they follow them, but I don't think it's something you can set out to do.
So you have, Alex has written a great book called X-Rated, is that what it's called?
X-Films.
X-Films, yeah.
10 films.
Yeah, and it's really great because you sort of go through each of your films and sort of the various processes that you went through, and
how we got the money.
How you got the money. Everybody else,
how'd you get the money for that?
But Repo Man, of course, is a very interesting story. So many people love that film, and was that your last studio, or I guess Syd and Nancy was also a studio film, is that right? Or no?
No, Walker and Repo Man were made for studios. Syd and Nancy was made as a co-production between a British television company, which was making films called Zenith, and an American company called Embassy Home Entertainment. So it was an independent film, and it was distributed independently by the Sam Goldwyn Company, although it's ended up in the hands of the studios in a way that I can't fathom.
But if you want scary reading, the chapter on Repo Man is just terrifying in terms of what Universal did to you and to the film. And I'm just so impressed that you kept making films after that. Can you even sort of encapsulate what happened, or is it just too big of a...
Oh, it's boring. I mean, I'm so tired of Repo Man. I'm so tired of it. I mean, you think about what Universal did this year when they brought out a film called Repo Man, right? You know, they retitled some piece of crap that had on the shelf for 3 years and bring it out called Repo Man. I mean, if I was able to employ, you know, lawyers, I would have a very good case against Universal for a thing called passing off, which is like a trade infringement. I mean, essentially, the studios are a bunch of racketeers. They operate a blacklist. They behave in a way that's extraordinary. I mean, how can you explain to me that when, in Detroit, when the auto companies negotiate with the unions, the auto companies have to negotiate separately, but when the studios negotiate with the Screen Actors Guild or the Directors Guild, they operate as a cartel. What gives them the right to do that is completely illegal. It's a violation of the RICO statutes, and it's called racketeering, and yet they get away with it. So there's not much to do, is there?
So, and maybe what some people don't know is that you recently completed a film called Repo Chick.
Yes, sir.
Starring Rosanna Arquette, who has been here the last
couple
couple days. Who was here today, and she left this morning. So, is that going to be released? Like, what is the plan for that film?
You would have to ask Sir David Lynch, because he is, in theory at least, the distributor and foreign sales agent of the film. But I think he's kind of involved at the moment in selling transcendental meditation to teenagers. Maybe when he's got his L. Ron Hubbard moment over, he can find his way back to Repo Chick and we can come back and show you Repo Chick. Yeah, pretty funny. Rosanna's very good at it. She's just tremendous. She looks like Iggy Pop.
That I want to see. And is it true that Karen Black is in this also?
Karen Black is in it.
Oh my God, we have to see this movie.
Actually, there are more women in the film than men, which is good because it's the first film that I've done that's actually got that kind of cast balance. Nice. So yes!
Let's all call David Lynch and tell him to release this film. So your career to me is just so fascinating because you made Highway Patrol Man, which was released here in Spanish, English subtitles. You filmed that in Mexico. You made some really interesting documentaries. You made a documentary about Emmanuel and Kurosawa, and you've done Chinese television, is that right? Japanese television. Is there any sort of trajectory that you have in your mind of where you're going, or do you just, whatever interests you, you go there?
No, I think I have no trajectory at all. I mean, absolutely devoid of trajectory. No, I have no clue. I mean, I'm glad that it worked out this way. I'm glad I was able to make a dozen films. I was very fortunate in that regard. But boy, no, I have no idea how it came about, or why it came about, or where it will lead, or where it will end.
That's a pretty good place to maybe open it up to some questions from the audience. Oh, there's a...
The last one's pretty good.
Someone wrote a question and dropped it in our question box, and then we'll ask you guys a couple of questions too. With this awesome cast, or referring to the Straight Hell, was it difficult to control the buried egos? I think maybe we already addressed that. How did you get the bodies to move in the burning car?